Hey guys, Heather and Levi here in the kitchen, and we are going to have a very important conversation tonight. We have raised our own meat to some degree for 3 years. We've raised chickens, we've raised rabbits, quail, and we've hunted some deer. And right now we're in the process of raising meat goats and pigs. But most of the meat that we have processed here on farm has been in the form of chickens and rabbits, and those are the subjects of the discussion tonight because we really think that rabbits are so much better than chickens in so many ways, and we're going to get right into it. How fitting! Oh my goodness, this was not on purpose. I don't have a chicken mug. I don't think. Do I?
No, there's a rooster on the Kentucky mug, I think.
That doesn't count.
No. We've had countless people tell us that there's no way they could raise and butcher rabbits with the intention to eat them because they're just too cute.
But here's the thing, so when you see that postcard or that greeting card at Hallmark for Easter, it has a bunny, it has a cute little duck, it has a cute little lamb.
Cute little chickies on those Hallmark cards
too. Cute little chickies and cute little piggies and cute little deer. I mean, Bambi, goodness. Lots of meat sources are cute. So I feel like that's kind of, it's almost a cop-out, essentially. Now, I know a lot of people don't keep, some people do, but a lot of people don't keep things like pigs and ducks as pets. And rabbits really are becoming really popular as house pets in America right now. So it's not like that's a bad thing, but I could kind of understand how rabbits, more than some of the other animals, might be more equated to the pet side of things. But I have had some friends come into my barn and see our meat rabbits with the white fur and the red eyes, and they're like, oh, that thing looks creepy. And when it comes to selling the bunnies at the farm store like we do every couple of months, they won't accept the red-eyed whites because most of the public thinks that they're creepy. So I feel like if you really can't get past the cuteness, going with a true meat breed, which I think everyone should do anyway, might help kind of settle that uneasiness.
Some of the pros that chickens do have over rabbits is the familiarity with chicken. You can go to any grocery store at any time, anywhere in the country, and pick up some chicken legs, chicken breasts, whatever, off of the shelves. But only specialty shops and only sometimes will you be able to find rabbit in a freezer section or in a fridge, butchered and ready to bring home and prepare.
So I think the idea when people go from buying from the grocery store to raising meat at home, their first thought is to raise something that they have gotten accustomed to buying all the time. So that's where chicken really has a favor, I think, especially in America, where we really just don't see much else besides chicken, beef, and pork at the grocery store. Another thing that chickens do have over rabbits is their fat. Rabbits do have some fat on them, at least mine have when we've processed them, but from what I hear, that fat isn't really good. With chickens, you can actually render that fat down. It's called schmaltz, and they also have that really nice crispy skin. You don't exactly pluck or shave a rabbit. The rabbit skin isn't something that is ever kept, so that's something that the rabbit just doesn't have. Also, chickens are pretty widely known to eat bugs, and a lot of homesteaders really love to keep chickens on their farms to help control things like ticks and grasshoppers, and really they can forage for a lot of their own food by eating bugs. But, and here's the but, that's if they can move and get around to eat those bugs. So when you think about raising chicken at home off a homestead, a lot of people really hope to exactly match what they can buy at the grocery store. And you can buy a chicken that is called a Cornish cross that you can raise at home that looks very much like a dressed out Tyson chicken that you would buy at the store. But towards the end of their life, those chickens really don't move a whole lot. They actually can't. A lot of times when you go to process them, their thigh bones are bent just from the weight and how fast they put it on. They're not doing a whole ton of foraging and moving around. So that's something to remember. So many homesteaders will choose to keep what's called a dual purpose chicken. It's a chicken that is really nice and meaty, but they also can lay eggs. But when you do raise a dual purpose chicken, because they're also laying eggs, you are getting a smaller carcass out of it. You're not going to get that really nice big juicy breast like we're used to seeing at the store here in America. It's going to be a little bit leaner bird, a little bit flatter of a chest, but they are really nice, viable options. It's still not my favorite, so let's get into it. So with a dual purpose chicken, the hope with a lot of people is that they will breed on their own, go broody, and raise their own chicks. I think that would be the most ideal thing. We have dozens and dozens of chickens out in our chicken run. We're actually working on paring down our chicken flock right now because they're not doing what I really had expected them to do. I've got breeds like Dorking out there. I do have some Rhode Island Red and some Barred Rock and other breeds that were sold to me as dual purpose, where I think only one of them, so two. I've had the Silky go broody once a year, and I had one Barred Rock go broody one time out of probably 65 chickens. The most reliable broody birds that I've had are our turkeys. Our turkeys have actually sat and hatched out young every year that we've had them. The turkeys have been far more reliable than the chickens, though I think if it came down to it as a sustainability standpoint, I wouldn't be able to rely on the chickens to do that. I would have to make sure that I had other things in place, like an incubator and all of the things that really it takes to raise a batch of chickens, and that can add up very, very quickly. So let's take all of that out of the equation though right now. A lot of people don't really want to jump in with both feet, and they like to get their feet wet by raising up a batch of those meat chickens that I talked about before, the Cornish cross. So you don't really need an incubator or anything like that when you're dealing with those. Normally when people go to raise Cornish cross, they'll either order them through the mail or they'll have access to them locally at the farm store. We have not seen Cornish cross at our local farm store all year long, and we're in September. I haven't seen them one time, not even for a higher price. I have not seen them at all. And we go weekly.
It's this time last year that we saw them roughly.
I haven't seen them ever. Not this year at all. Like
no, this time last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the last time I saw them.
Yeah.
So getting them locally is a little iffy. It's a little bit iffy, at least for here. It's not, I might have to call every day and it could be kind of a hassle. So our other option, if we wanted to raise meat chickens, is to get them through the mail. I have done this a lot. I have been delivered dead boxes of chickens at least twice. Or some of them have been dead, but entire boxes of chickens, dead, have come to me twice. And oftentimes, that's out of the hatchery's control. There's things that go wrong in the process, and sometimes your post office just continually mishandles the birds, and it can be a really unreliable source for getting what you need. So when you get your chicks in the mail, hopefully you've got, a pretty good survival rate from the mail. You've got to be really hands-on with them. They haven't had the opportunity to have their mother there to teach them how to eat, how to drink, where the heat source is, how not to peck each other's eyes out. It's a lot more labor intensive to raise chicks. Right now, the brooder bulb for a heat lamp costs $6. You want to have several of those on hand because dust and stuff can collect on them, and I have them pop kind of regular, especially if they sit for like a summer and then I go to use them again. They pretty much pop, or I guess, what's it called?
Burn out.
They burn out within the first 10 minutes of turning them on after not having them on all summer. So there's an expense there, and you always want to have backups because if those babies get cold, man, the times that I have run out, because our brooder is outside in our shed. We lose power here all the time. The number of times that I've had to run out and put baby chicks in a box and then put them in my bathroom with blankets over them, trying to keep them warm. It's the most anxiety-inducing thing to have to be in charge of that, and I'd rather not. Chickens are extraordinarily stinky, especially Cornish cross broilers. They smell so bad. Just even the birds themselves. It's something that's really hard for me to get past after raising bunnies. I swear, bunnies have ruined me for birds. So when it comes down to it, chickens they can be decently loud, and that can be a problem if you're trying to raise your own meat in an urban environment. And when it comes down to it too, for the butchering and processing, for things to go as easy as possible, the kind of equipment that you need is very expensive. We bought a yard bird chicken plucker in 2019, so it was before all of the things happened in the world and inflation and all that, and I paid $400 for it, and we use a turkey fryer as our scalder. So just our processing equipment cost around $500 all told, and that doesn't include everything that we needed to put together for their chicken tractor and all of that. There's just a lot to think about. Now, you don't necessarily need to have a plucker, but I'll tell you that if you want to have that perfect bird with the skin on it like you're used to buying from the store, it's very, very labor intensive to pluck all of those feathers out. And like I said before, the Cornish cross don't move around a whole lot towards the end when they get really big, and so they basically lay where they poop. And so to try to hand pluck this nasty poopy bird, no. Let's get to the bunnies. Let's talk about something a little bit nicer. So I did a little bit of math earlier, and if you're wondering about cost, I would say if you're not planning on selling anything, if you're not planning on selling meat, you're not planning on selling live animals, to pound for pound rabbits and chickens, even for the startup cost with like the breeders for the rabbits and like the brooder for the chickens, it all kind of washes out. Pound for pound, they're about $3 a pound, at least for us and our cost. So the pros of the rabbits don't necessarily include price. I know that's something a lot of homesteaders talk about, is how cheap rabbits are. I think they can be, but that is not always the case, because I find that people often, when they're talking about what they've tallied up as far as what rabbits cost to raise, they're not including things like the purchase of their breeders and the maintenance of their breeders. You're feeding the breeder bunnies every single day. You can't not include that in the cost. So they wash out there, but there are so many more benefits to raising and butchering rabbits. And part of that is rabbits are mammals and they will raise their own young. There's very little that really we have to watch out for when we go to raise a litter of rabbits. Rabbits are very eager to breed and they're very eager to raise their own young. Chickens, you can't just convince them to go broody and do the thing. They kind of have to, I don't know what triggers in their head to make that happen, but rabbits are a lot more ready to be mothers really, really reliably. And they take about the same time. So if you put eggs in an incubator, it takes about 28 days for them to hatch, and rabbits are pregnant for 31 days. So there's not necessarily a time difference either, because once the baby rabbits are born, they're raised up for about 8 to 10, sometimes 12 weeks to butcher weight, and the same thing is true for chickens. So they wash out there as well. But with the rabbits raising their own young, it relieves a lot off of the farmer, and I'm a huge fan of calculating sweat equity when it comes into anything, because my time is very, very valuable. We have a lot going on, and I don't like babysitting birds when I don't have to, when I can have rabbits and have them do their thing. There are cases where rabbits can kind of screw up their first litter or two. I've had it happen. I always give them 3 chances, and because they are pregnant for such a short amount of time, there's really not a lot of time lost to give them those opportunities. And I find by the second time they have babies, and definitely by the third, if they haven't figured it out, you know, those first couple times, they've definitely figured it out by that third time that they have babies. And then their females are usually good to breed relatively consistently for around 4 years, and bucks, the males, for much, much longer than that. Bunnies are very, very clean animals. They clean themselves the way that we keep our rabbits up in cages. Their droppings fall straight through, and it's very, very clean for them. And I especially like having the rabbits over a dirt floor, because that dirt floor of the barn absorbs all of the urine, and then their manure is left on top of the dirt floor and can readily be harvested and put directly on the garden, which is another pro that differs from from the chickens. Chicken manure is very hot, it's full of nitrogen, and that nitrogen has to have time to break down before it can be used as fertilizer. It's about 6 months. Rabbit manure can be used right away. I always say, even if people aren't wanting to keep rabbits for meat, every gardener should have a pet rabbit so they have all the time fertilizer for their garden. Rabbits are also really quiet, and because of that, they're a lot more city friendly. There's often not, I guess, an ordinance against having rabbits, where a lot of cities will limit the number of chickens that you can have if they allow you to have any at all. So where chickens might not be accessible in a neighborhood, rabbit meat very well could be a viable option for people in the city. They're quiet and they don't smell. People are probably not even going to know that they're there. So around here, the rabbit feed is $17 for a 50-pound bag, and the broiler feed, the 22% protein, is $25 for a 50-pound bag. You can really take down the amount of pellets that a rabbit has to eat by feeding it greens or hay. And here we can get really nice quality hay for $4.50 a bale. So giving the rabbits hay along with pellets honestly does make them a little bit cheaper to raise than the chickens, even with feeding breeders. I mean, if you're thinking about raising rabbits, call around to different places, different farms, probably not farm stores necessarily, because those bales of hay in that vacuum sealed green bag are very, very expensive and not worth it. So if you can buy off farm and get a no spray hay, which is really important if you want to use the rabbit's manure in your garden, that's going to really help cut down on feed costs. So while we're talking about feed, I really find that the rabbits, especially the Californian rabbits, convert feed into muscle very, very efficiently. You'll get some breeds of rabbits that just are not built to be meat rabbits, and those rabbits will have a very poor feed conversion ratio, and those are some of the bigger rabbits. Honestly, you'll find Flemish Giants often marketed towards people who want to use larger rabbits like that for meat rabbits, but those bunnies will put on lots of very heavy bone. We had a breeder here that was half Flemish, maybe not even. She did have some Flemish genetics in her, and we could always tell which kits were hers when we were processing them because their bones were much, much bigger, and we don't eat the bones. I mean, we make bone broth, but those big old bones really just take away from the available nutrients that are going into the meat production, and so it's not always worth it to get any kind of bunny to grow out for meat. For a long time, for a couple years, well, year and a half,
roughly, yeah.
1 year, we raised pretty bunnies because we wanted to also sell them as pets, but it really, really wasn't worth growing those bunnies out. We had to grow them out for a full 16 weeks to get a 2.5 pound carcass. And the Californians that we have now, we can grow them for 10 weeks and get a 3 pound carcass. That's so much better. And they eat less doing it. So it's not just the time. I barely feed these bunnies a cup a day of pellets, and they don't even eat it all. You go to feed them more and you're like, come on, bunny, I've got you food. They're like, I'm okay. It's fine. They do not eat very much. It's not true of all rabbits, but the Californians that we have, their feed conversion is awesome. So because rabbits are mammals, they do feed their babies their own milk. And in general, rabbits don't wean their young. Their young are called kits for about 6 to 8 weeks. So the whole time that they are nursing off of mom, they're getting a lot of really great nutrition that the hay and the feed just cannot provide. And for the first 2 weeks that the mother is nursing the babies, she actually doesn't need any extra nutrition. She feeds the babies once or twice a day a very nutrient dense milk, but it's not a whole lot of it. So she only really needs extra feed around the 2 week mark, and that's mostly because at that point, that's when her babies have their eyes open, they're starting to hop out of the nest, and they're starting to taste her food. And so we need to make sure everybody has enough feed at that point, but it's still not a significant amount of feed. And it's not even that much if you have them out on grass or you have them also eating hay, and if they're nursing off of mom. So it's a very, very little bit of input, which is not the case with the broiler chickens. Broilers actually will eat so much, they'll gorge themselves, that you have to literally take the food away for 12 hours at a time, starting at around 3 weeks old, or they're going to eat themselves to death. And I've actually had it happen where I have gone into, I used to keep the feed kind of up on like a pulley system in my tractor, and I'd go in there to lower the feed, and they would be like eating my ankles when I walked in there. Scary. So rabbits are just much more efficient. They don't have this crazy voracious appetite because their body has it under control. They just know how to do it.
All right, let's talk about processing chickens versus rabbits. In addition to the plucker and the scalder, we decided to make some killing cones, which is essentially an upside down traffic cone that helps hold the bird when you dispatch it. Because initially we had 2 paracord strings coming down with a loop on either end that we were able to hang the bird with essentially by its feet upside down, but that caused its own set of issues with the birds flapping around, and often they would break their flappers, the wings, and that bruises meat and ultimately produces less meat for us.
Yeah, a little bit less, especially if you're going to go ahead and sell the meat. It's really hard to sell a whole chicken with a bruised back and a broken wing. So there are ways to do chickens cheaper. It's just a lot more labor intensive, and you do have losses for things like that. We did find a tutorial for making your own killing cone out of a 5-gallon bucket here on YouTube. So that is a viable option for making something cheaper. I think the killing cones that are big enough for a Cornish cross are around $40 each right now online, and there's no reason that you would have to pay that, so don't. Even then, even with having some things a little bit DIY and a little bit cheaper, rabbits just overall, what do we need in order to process rabbits?
The only specialty thing we got for the rabbits specifically is a little implement called the hopper popper, and it's a cervical dislocation tool, but that's not even really necessary. There are many different methods of dispatching a rabbit humanely. A lot of people use the broomstick method, there's the chop method, you can use a high-powered pellet gun. The hopper popper is made by a company here in the United States, and I cannot tell you how wonderful that thing is. It has been sitting on our porch for 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's
Doesn't have a spot of rust on it. It's bare metal. It's made with very high quality, heavy duty stainless steel. It's
hand welded.
Probably the sturdiest piece of equipment on this farm, and it's like
that big.
Little.
People will use the broomstick method to dispatch chickens as well, but you have the same problem that we talked about before with them flapping their wings real hard and breaking wings. I don't see how that just won't happen. Sometimes, honestly, the plucker will break legs and wings as well. And while that food really is edible, it is kind of a bummer. In general, the carcasses come out much more whole when you're dealing with rabbits, most of the time with a lot less equipment involved.
The only tools that really are required once dispatching has been completed are a good sharp knife and a good pair of pruning shears.
We've known people that have peeled chickens before. I peel chickens now because I don't like dealing with their feathers and stuff, but you do miss out on some of the pros. It kind of like knocks down some of the pros in order to not have to deal with some of the cons. So, I mean, rabbits, in my opinion, are far superior. And one of the major reasons that I think that's the case is rabbit kits, rabbit babies are very easy to sell. We actually do still keep some of our pretty bunnies, as we call them, because our local store will buy them for $13 to $15 a piece. So when we raise up some kits to 8 weeks old of our lop bunnies, and let's say she has 8 babies, I only have to really feed them for around 6 weeks. Remember, they're only on mother's milk the first 2 weeks. And then I have very minimal feed input before I bring them to the store and get, let's math, 8 times 15. So that one litter of bunnies more than pays for just our breeders for an entire year. So think about that. I mean, the turnaround, if you have a place to be able to sell them, rabbits really can be nearly free at that point. And it's hard to sell. I mean, you can sell meat. People sell chicken meat. There's different laws and hoops to run through with that. But when it comes to selling live animals, there's a lot less involved, and it's a lot easier to sell an 8-week-old bunny than it is to sell an 8-week-old chicken. And even the rabbit pelts, if you felt like you wanted to deal with those, we have experimented with trying to tan hides in the past. I'm not doing it right now because it's fly season, but over winter I'm gonna try again, because a lot of people will buy rabbit pelts to make things out of, or you could even make something out of rabbit pelts and just increase the value of the rabbit. There's another cool thing with rabbits that I want to try this year that I haven't done in years past, is a lot of people will take the ears of the rabbit and dehydrate them as treats for their dogs. I think that's awesome. We just throw the ears away normally, so why not use them in that way?
Yeah. I personally would process 400 rabbits before I willingly processed 4 Cornish cross hens. The chickens are just far more time intensive, labor intensive. This past weekend, a friend of mine and I butchered 19 rabbits. And the whole time we were kind of just catching up. He's been out of town for several months, hadn't talked to him in a while, so we weren't really motoring through them. And just the two of us processed 19 bunnies in 2 hours, very taking our time.
Yeah, I mean, they even had some of our young children out there helping them process, teaching them how to do things, and they still got done in 2 hours. You know, you take your time with kids when you're teaching them how to do things, so it could have gone even faster.
Probably twice as fast. Like, we sat around and talked a lot.
I know, and that's great. You can just leisurely do the thing, and it's so much harder to do that with chickens. It's not impossible once you get into a good rhythm, but I feel like you need a lot more hands on deck, and it still even just takes so much.
There's much more brain power prepping the scalder, prepping the plucker, if that's the way we're planning to do so. With the rabbits, the hopper poppers stays on our porch. It's always there. Never have to think about that. And the processing knives and shears are all in a bag. I just have to grab the bag, grab a bunny, and get to work.
Seriously, consider rabbit, guys. So worth it.
Much better.
I've talked to a lot of people before who have tried rabbit meat in the kitchen and really just haven't enjoyed it. And I think a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that there is a learning curve when it comes to cooking rabbit. I'm not gonna lie, that is a thing. If you can find a recipe out there that is designed for rabbit and trying it that way, I think you're going to be blown away with how delicious rabbit really is. It does have a little bit of a different texture than chicken. So the muscle fibers are a lot smaller and it's a lot closer of a texture. If you've ever had duck before, it's a lot like a non-greasy duck. The texture is almost identical. Or if you've ever had frog legs before, the texture is very, very similar to that. The key with cooking rabbit is to cook it low and slow and inside some kind of broth or stew or some kind of moisture. You definitely want to cook it covered. Some recipes that I could highly recommend are Hassenpfeffer. I'll put the spelling for that down here. It's one of our hands down favorite meals to cook with rabbit. And also one of the easiest ways that I recommend cooking rabbit to everyone is in the crock pot. So you piece the rabbit out and then you put it in the crock pot with a can of cream of whatever, condensed soup. You don't even have to add any extra water. Put it on low for 8 hours or high for 4 hours and just walk away. The rabbit will just fall off of the bone. Any of those tighter or tougher tendons just melt away, and you've never had a more delicious homegrown meal than that. And really, ultimately, the most foolproof way to cook rabbit is to actually put it up in cans. So I have put up a lot of canned rabbit in the past, and you actually will pack it into the canner raw, and it cooks while it's inside the jar. And really similarly to the crock pot method, those tendons and things just melt away, and you can actually debone the rabbit straight out of the can and use it like you would use any canned chicken or cooked chicken. We've used canned rabbit for a lot of things, to include throwing it in some soup as a last minute protein to add to something like chicken and rice soup. I have made fritters out of it. I have added it to pasta salad. I have added it to things like chicken divan, anything that really kind of calls for cooked chicken, chicken tacos, just put rabbit in there. Just make sure that you're cooking the rabbit with a little bit of fat, low, slow moisture. It's really hard to go wrong. I haven't done any comprehensive how to raise rabbits types of videos. If that is something that you're interested in, let me know down below. We're about to start our breeding season, and this is a really good time to do a series like that if you're interested. I have cooked a couple different rabbit recipes and put them here on YouTube. I'm gonna condense all my rabbit stuff into one place and put it in a playlist right up here.
We've had countless people tell us that they
Start
could...
over, I was looking at you crazy. I was like...